Broadcasting from the studios of Business Radio X, it's time for the Good2Give Podcast. This show is underwritten by the Community Foundation for Northeast Georgia, connecting people who care with causes that matter. Now, here is your host.
Welcome, everyone. This is Maria Sullivan with the Community Foundation for Northeast Georgia. I am the proud development officer for the Community Foundation, and really excited about being here today. I'm with my co-host, DePriest Waddy.
Hi, everybody. DePriest Waddy, CEO, Community Foundation for Northeast Georgia. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we have some really exciting guests today, and we're going to jump right in. We first have Wayne Naugle. He's the Executive Director for Families, and I'll let him share a little bit about that. And then Scott Phelan, who's with Janney Montgomery Scott. I didn't realize all those names were there.
Yes.
The Certified Financial Planner. And Scott is also a board member for the Community Foundation for Northeast Georgia. So we're very excited that you're here. Scott has his own podcast, so he's an expert.
Board chair.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, really active, and he's actually who is introducing us to Wayne. I am just going to jump right in. Anything else, co-host here?
We're all good.
Let's go. Wayne, I want to hear, I read about you this morning and your journey with Families for Families, and started in 2012. Is that?
Families for Families started in 2017.
Oh, okay. You need to change that on your website. I think I read that, unless I didn't have my glasses on at the same time. Maybe I just saw
better be 2017. If not, it'll be fixed quick.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about Families for Families.
Yeah, so I'll start out. My wife and I have 5 kids, and back in 2010, we started looking into foster care and what that might look like for our family. I grew up in construction, knocking trees down and clearing land, and we went through a home study process to get our home approved to be a foster family. It took 6 months. It was the most inefficient, unorganized process I think I've ever been through in my life. But we finally got a phone call on a Monday morning, and they said, your home's been approved. We had no idea what that meant. 5 minutes later, we got another phone call, and they said, are y'all ready for your first placement? And we were like, tell us about it. And they said, well, there's a little girl last night, and she was left behind a dumpster in Atlanta. She's got 5 drugs in her system. Mom's admitted to alcohol use. There's some mental health issues. And so that's really about all we know about her. And so we said yes. And about 5 minutes after talking about it, went and picked her up on a Wednesday night, 3 days later. Had her in our home for a year and went through seizures and detox and trips to CHO and court visits and really just all the stuff these kids go through. 53 weeks to the day, we get another phone call. Mom's had another baby. This time Mom was in jail. And they called us, and so we went and picked her up. And then a year later, April 8th of 2012, we adopted both those little girls. So they are 10 and 11 now, and we've had an incredible journey. We've gotten to know birth mother. She's homeless in Atlanta. She's a prostitute. But probably more than that is she's one of the kids that age out of foster care. So she aged out at 18 years old. About one boy and one girl age out every day in our state. And those kids turn around, many of them are homeless, and they start putting kids back in foster care. So
Mom aged out of foster care?
Their birth mother aged out of foster care.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we know that 71% of the girls that age out of foster care in Georgia find themselves pregnant within 1 year.
Wow.
And the cycle starts over again. Mm-hmm. And so we got Abby and Ashley now. They're 10 and 11. Ashley goes to Waka Mountain. She's in a self-contained classroom with 7 students and 3 teachers. She's got some pretty significant brain malformations and just some drug use and some X chromosomes. And then Abby is at Lanier Christian Academy, and she goes to school 3 days a week, and she's home with us 2 days a week. And so it's like a hybrid model. I think they call it a university model. I never say it, but that's what it is. So really through all of that, left the business world, even left church ministry and went in and started a foster care agency that partners with churches and tries to find good homes for kids and godly homes for kids.
That's amazing. The one question that comes to my mind is, I think there are many people that have the heart to become a foster parent, but if not everyone has the heart or is concerned about, okay, gosh, this child may have some challenges,
right?
And it's a little more than the average child. So a lot more. And not everyone feels that way. And that, oh my gosh, I don't want to take on more than I already have, or that's a lot. How did you look past that and say, okay, even though this child had it was upfront telling you, okay, they may have some issues.
Yeah. It's a great question. And it's something that a lot of people don't realize. So we adopted, our girls were 1 and 2 when we adopted them. And so normally they say the younger you adopt children, sometimes the less trauma they have when they're older, but the less you know about their medical condition. Mm-hmm. While we knew Ashley had some issues, we didn't really find out until she was 5 and 6 years old, and even 8 and 9 years old as they began to develop more and more. And there are no guarantees. And yeah, I think it's a commitment you make to a child. And I think one of the dangers of foster care is people think I'm going to adopt this kid or I'm going to foster a kid and that's going to make my life complete. And it's you giving everything. And those kids don't make your life complete. It's constant giving and it's constant loving them. And it's a choice the parents make for the children. And that's what we did. And we love them and they're a challenge. There's some days they're great and some days they're a lot of work, but we would do it all over again every day.
So does the state help you financially when you have a child and you said they're in a specific kind of school? You called it I was thinking not an incubator, but it was, what'd you call it?
In a self-contained
Self-contained.
Right.
What does that mean?
So that means that the teachers, there's 7 kids, 3 teachers. So like one girl has a trach in her classroom. One girl I think's in a wheelchair. So they go get breakfast, bring it to the room. They go get lunch and bring it to the room. The kids are not in the, I don't want to say general population, that sounds terrible, but they're not in the population of the school at all. They're self-contained in their classroom because of their special needs.
I see.
In the state, so if you foster in Georgia, you get a per diem while you're fostering. If you adopt a child that has special needs or they're part of a sibling group, then the state does do some things to help that child get to when they're 18. So it's part of what you were getting as a per diem as a foster family, not all of it, but the state does help out with insurance and stuff for our girls and for all the kids that are adopted in Georgia.
Yeah.
So would you say that most, if not all of the kids that get adopted have some type of issue that needs to be worked through, be mental or physical?
Yes.
Is that an accurate statement?
So we've done 125 adoptions since 2017 when we started. 50 of those have been this year. 40 of those were last year. So most have been the last couple of years because kids are usually in care for 2 or 3 years before they go to adoption. And if the kids have some kind of special need or they're part of a sibling group, then the state helps out with those children. Of 125 adoptions that we've done, 125 have been special needs adoptions.
Is that right?
Wow.
So 100% of them are.
And how many kids have you fostered over that period of time?
Yeah. So our agency has fostered right at 1,000 kids since we started in 2017.
Okay.
And so we've placed a little over 200 kids this year. Kids are coming and going all the time in foster care. They come in today and 3 months later, grandma shows up and they go home or mom gets her life worked out. And so we've been able to say yes 200 times this year. Yeah. We're the largest faith-based agency in Georgia. And so I guess the one thing we don't like to talk about is we've said yes 200 times. We've denied over 2,000 kids this year that we just don't have homes for. Mm-hmm. And there's all kinds of reasons. Neglect, meth is huge in our state. Fentanyl is everywhere. And so we deal with a lot of abuse, a lot of neglect, and a lot of it's drug related into what we deal with.
What does an assessment process look like? You spoke to it earlier that during your assessment, it was not so great. So how could it have been better?
So we worked with the Department of Family and Child Services. We were not with the private agency when we were going through our assessment. And so this is not a knock on our state government at all. But if you're working through an assessment and you get a phone call for an abused kid, you drop that assessment and go take care of that child. And so the process gets very slow. But so as a private agency, I have 5 full-time people that do assessments and they have 30 contractors underneath them. And that's all they do is assessment. They don't go pick kids up. They don't manage cases. They strictly do assessments. And so it's everything from like your sleeping arrangements in your house. Like you have to have a window in the bedroom. You have to have a closet. It's sleeping arrangements to what age kids can share bedrooms and they can't share bedrooms. It's where you lock your guns up at. It's where you keep your chemicals at. It's your cars have insurance. You got a driver's license. You got a mayor's certificate. It's a drug test. It's a physical test. It's a TB test. There's a lot. It's a long questionnaire about how you were brought up and how you were parented growing up and the traumas that you had. And is that going to bring out a trauma in a child? The child comes in with that trauma, is that going to trigger something you had? And we want to know that a lot of our foster families come from really tough situations, and we want to know they've worked through those situations before they bring a child into their home and it triggers something from their past. So there's a lot of assessments, a lot of counseling. There's a 25-hour training class they have to go through called impact training. We do water safety classes and CPR first aid. So it's a pretty intensive process. And when I get aggravated with the amount of paperwork and questions, I have to remember that we're placing another human life in one of our foster homes. And there needs to be a very good vetting process to make sure that kids are not re-abused again in foster homes, which does happen.
So why do you think it is that these foster families come from tough backgrounds? I'm curious about that.
I think a lot of times that the way they grew up, that they don't want that to happen to another
somebody
child.
else.
Yeah. And so, and to be honest with you, families that struggle growing up, I guess they see the need that's not there. When I first got into foster care, I would have never believed there's 12,000 kids in our state that are neglected, abused, and in foster care. Just because in the world that I grew up in, kids were taken care of. I had a great mom and dad growing up, had a great family growing up. If something would have happened to my mom and dad growing up, I would have had aunts, uncles that would have taken care of us. So I never dreamed that, I never saw that world until I got in it. And so I think it's hidden really good in Georgia. I think it's hidden sometimes because we don't want to see it. And I think it's hidden sometimes because it's just disguised very well. Yeah. When you go overseas, like to Honduras and Africa, which we've been to India, they keep orphans, foster kids in group homes, and you go to like a large building and you feed them and stuff. So they're very easy to see. In our culture, we do foster care. It's very difficult to see, are these Scott's foster kids or are they biological kids?
Yeah.
My kids are African-American, so you can tell they're not my biological kids. But if they were Caucasian kids, you wouldn't know. And so there's a lot more kids around that are in foster care that we just don't realize they're in
That's
foster
interesting.
care.
Scott, how did you get involved with Families for Families?
Wayne's dad, Roger Naugle, was my business partner back in 2003. So he and I worked together. So the way I started in the financial services business was I used to call on financial advisors for a number of years. And Roger, Wayne's dad, was one of the folks that I called on. And one day he said, hey, why don't you come in with me? I'll give you some clients to get you started on what I call the retail side of the business, where I've got clients that have investment accounts with us versus calling on financial advisors. And he and I worked together for a few years, and then he retired and I kept obviously doing what I'm doing. And so I got to know Wayne through Roger, and then Wayne was in the grading business, like he mentioned, for a number of years, and then got into the foster care business in the nonprofit world. And so I've always been indebted to Roger and love what Wayne's doing and love Wayne as a person. I said, hey, those are people that I'm happy to support any way I can. And it just grew from there.
Well, we're so grateful for you to introduce us to Wayne and learn about how others can get involved, how we can get involved more. And I'm just fascinated. I've always had a heart for the foster kids that are aged out. I actually have been a respite foster mother.
Oh, really?
I have been very involved, and I'm at 16 years of it. So I do understand a little bit about that aged out process and the whole meth use. And
It's a big deal.
Yeah, I've had some really great partners, like Wellspring has been really helpful to us, or Kathy Colpinson over at Chris 180. And so they've been really helpful in my journey with that.
So we work with Wellspring as well. So
beautiful.
Great organization.
Yeah.
What percent of the foster kids are in county? Because I understand that once they move out of county, there's a very slim chance that they get reunified with their families. Is that right?
So that's a big problem. So there are, the data changes all the time, but I know a year or so ago, they were talking like half the kids are actually placed in the county they're taken from. And so what happens is if kids come into foster care, let's say a sibling group of 4 comes in care, and just hypothetically, they're from Gwinnett County and there's not a home for them. 2 of those kids may go to Macon and 2 may go to Savannah because there's not foster homes for them. And if there is a home, there's not a home, they'll take all 4 kids. And then what happens is sibling visits become very difficult because the kids are 3 hours apart. And maybe more important than that, visits with mom and dad become very difficult because they've got to transport the kids so far to see mom and dad.
Wow.
And it is the closer we can keep kids to their home, the better it is. The challenge with that in Georgia is from the business side of things. It's easier to start an agency in Metro Atlanta and let the state send you kids from all over the state. And if there's not enough homes, they will, right? And so we've been very strategic. We have 7 offices in Georgia. Most of those are in rural parts of Georgia. And so we're trying to plant offices over the entire state, 3 more, and we'll have the whole state covered. And we want to keep kids close to their home so they can be close to mom and dad. And so if reunification is possible, it happens quicker. And not only does it happen quicker, the mom's able to see that child, a lot more visits and stuff. And we've been very strategic about trying to spread out to keep kids close to their parents where they are. And I'll share a story with you. We had a child, this was a couple of years ago. We got a phone call for, I think it was 2 kids under the age of 4. And they were from Camden County, which if you know where that is, that's the southeast corner of Georgia. And they called us like for 2 or 3 days. You have a home in Savannah, you got a home in Griffin, you got a home in Dublin, And so they ended up placing those kids 5 hours away in North Georgia because there were no homes to take 2 kids in South Georgia.
My goodness.
And so there's just a huge deficit of foster homes in our state that can take kids. And there's more of a deficit in our rural areas that can take kids. And so that's a huge challenge in what we do. So recruitment of foster homes is a big thing that we do to keep our agency going.
I'm involved in Leadership North Fulton, and our project this year is with Foster Care Foundation, and that they provide the clothing and toys and furniture to across the state. And I'm sure Rachel, but listening to like many of the grandparents that have to take over because they are on enough foster parents. So grandparents are having to step into the role of parenting again. And that's difficult. So
it's very difficult.
Very difficult. But I commend you for all that you're doing because you're the largest in the state. And that's got to be, you sleep well at night, I'm sure. But also it probably gets you up early to think of what you have to do again and again because it's a large organization you're running. And I already want to get involved. Let me know.
We can get you a kid by Thanksgiving.
I wasn't thinking
It'll
that.
take a little longer than that.
Scott, what about you? Do you need any extra children?
Yeah, mine are just getting out of the house right now, so I'm looking for a couple.
So you got some extra bedrooms? Is that
I do have extra bedrooms.
That's what I'm hearing. That's exactly right.
I'm looking forward to a little bit of travel, spending the winter somewhere warm, hopefully. So.
Scott is a great supporter of Families for Families.
Yeah. I had a buddy that went through the process with another agency, and they called him right after, similar to your story, right after he got approved, 5 kids, adopted 5 kids at one time. So literally went from no children, he and his partner, to 5 kids. That's amazing. He's the happiest guy in the world, though. There was always something a little bit missing, in my opinion, because he had everything. He was wealthy and everything else. He had it all, but there was always something a little missing, and those kids have filled it in for him. It's a fantastic story.
That's awesome. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Children really do fulfill the gap.
They do. Yeah.
And I have friends that have never had children, and I always personally feel like they're missing out, whether they're foster, bio, whatever. But it is just the most fulfilling thing. If you've not had a child, it's the most rewarding thing. And I'm a grandparent now, so I'm even saying that's even better because you can hand them off, spoil them, and say,
absolutely.
Not my job.
We had our first grandchild 6 weeks ago, and so it's been great. When she gets fussy at night, she goes home.
So you're a granddad.
I'm a granddad. Yeah. Tiffany and Carlos had their first baby.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. I told my daughter 10 grandkids. I want 10 grandkids.
You want 10 grandkids?
I want 10. Her to have 10 grandkids.
Oh, you okay?
She'll listen. My son, not quite as much. So if I'm gonna have a bunch of
Where'd you
grandkids,
get that from? Is that from your wife? To not listening?
It might be somebody else. Yeah.
Okay. It's your wife's family, right?
That's right. That's my wife's.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Well, I got a question for you. Was it an active family decision to involve the biological mom once you adopted the girls, or was that part of the program agreement that the biological mom had to be involved?
So when you do adoption in Georgia, they call it TPR, termination of parental rights, and there is no more contact with mom and dad. And so we never had contact with their birth mother during the foster care process, even the adoption process. And I was actually speaking at a church at First Baptist Conyers, and I showed a picture of my 2 little girls, and they were 1 and 2 at the time. And this guy comes up to me at the end of it. His name was David Hammonds, and he came to me into the service, and he said, "Hey, I've been helping this homeless lady in Atlanta for the last couple of years, and she's been pregnant twice, and she looks like your oldest daughter." And I was like, "There's no way."
Wow.
And I said, "Just ask her what her name is," because I knew Abby's original last name. Mm-hmm. And he comes back and he said, "Hey, her name was Aisha Lovett." And it was Abby's name that was on her birth certificate. And so we went down there, looked for her with the ambassadors. We found her. Now we know where she stays at. And so every Christmas morning, we go spend Christmas morning with her. But it was a decision with our family. But I also know this, that as kids get older, they want to know their birth mom. They want to know who their birth dad is, if possible, right? And we just felt like that was a possibility that God had opened up for us to show them. And so we did that, and we still go see her. And she can't, about 10 minutes and she's done, just with some of the mental health issues and stuff. And we also want to be able to look at Abby and Ashley one day and say, we loved you, but we also tried to love your mom the best we could too.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we think that's important for our kids.
I was reading about all the support groups. Not only do you help with the assisting with adoptions, but you've got support groups for mothers that are foster moms. You can go on. There's so many.
Yeah.
I was listing, but I think that's really important because people that become foster parents need the accessibility to like a support group or meeting other people that are in the same situation. Can you talk a little bit about? I want to hear about your support groups and how they work.
So over half the families that go through this big, long process I was talking to you about with the vetting process, over half the families that go into foster care quit within the first year. And it's not because they don't love kids anymore. It's just, it is very difficult to do. And so so my wife and I did that. We struggled, not a lot of support when we did it. And so as an agency, as I got into that, I realized families need support. And so we have 7 offices in Georgia. So we do a moms group every month at every office. So 7 a month. And we get our moms together. We do some training. It's called TBRI training. We work with Mission, Georgia with that. And the TBRI training is trauma-based stuff. So just dealing with moms. And a lot of times our moms just get together and talk about, man, I had a hard week this week. I'm really struggling. I had to drop out of my ladies' Bible study or my ladies' book club because of these kids. And so we talk about that. We do a dad's group. We do the exact same study. We let the dad share about being a foster dad. And then one of the big things that we do at our office is we do date nights. And so you can drop off your foster kids and your bio kids like for 3.5 hours. And we really run almost like a vacation Bible school where they do crafts. So we do game time. We bring in blow up games. We feed them and we let the mom and dads go out and have a date once a month.
That's amazing.
Just to get rid of their kids. So
Like
you need to get rid of them
You gotta
sometimes.
have that oxygen
So
mask on your face
Yes.
sometimes.
Yeah,
before you
just
can
like Scott, your friend that went from 0 to
others.
5. This is a great, you need that break, especially when
Right.
you're used to having no one. And oh my gosh, all overwhelming.
Oh, he's got a lot of hired help. Yeah, he gets breaks when he needs.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, that's good.
He's always
You
had a
can
lot of
afford
hired
it.
help.
Yeah, but not everyone can.
not everyone
But not
can.
everyone can.
That's right.
And so that's a big thing. We try to do meals for our families once a week. We don't get all that. We're working on an app that will organize all of our volunteers right now. But getting meals to our families is important. When you have a foster kid, it's not just a kid. It means you inherited physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapies, trips to counselors, psychiatrists. You may have picked up another soccer practice. I got a visit with mom and dad. They got the court coming over. They got the private agency. They got DFACs. And so you have all these people in and out of your home, and you added 10 or 15 hours more a week of therapists and visits and driving along with your bio kids. So just to do a meal once a week for a family is sometimes just a huge blessing. We partner with churches. And so Bethlehem Church over in Winder this year took all 400 kids that we're doing for Christmas. We spent about $100 a kid. And they took all 400 kids and they're doing Christmas for all of our kids in the entire state. And so huge blessing to
That's
provide
amazing.
that. And then we do a birthday bag for all of our kids. I don't know how this works, Scott, but it seems like when we get a kid on Thursday, they have a birthday party on Friday. and we just got them Thursday night. We haven't even known about the kid for 24 hours. And I'll say this, most of the kids that are like 7, 8 years old, when we do a birthday party for them, they'll tell us this is the first time I've ever had a birthday party.
Oh gosh.
And so for us to be able to provide that through donors and through relationships is huge. And it sounds like small to us because I never went a birthday without a birthday party. But for that kid, he's never had a birthday before, is a big deal for that child.
That is a big deal. And 400 kids, $100 a child. How do you raise the money? And I don't want to bring Scott into this and from the financial aspect of it. But yeah, that can't come out of your pocket, or does it?
So Bethlehem Church is paying for all of it, which is incredible for us. And so about 220 of those are foster kids. And the other 180 is we do stuff for the biological kids at the homes too, because we never want the bio kids to resent the foster kids, right? Like, man, the foster kids, the agency brought them Christmas, but I didn't get Christmas from the agency. So we really try to love on our families. And I know that the families, when the biological kids are involved and they like the foster kids in the home, those families last longer than if the parents are always choosing between the foster kids and their own kids. And so we want it to all be a family unit that goes together.
That's amazing.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you hold different events to raise money and as far as fundraising?
Yes. And we just did our first gala, October 17th. Scott was there and they did a table and we raised $220,000 that night. So that was a really good night for us. We did $220,000 that night. And then I do a lot of asks, taking people to lunch and just sharing our vision and asking for money. And then we work with Wellspring. So we have a grant writer that we work with Wellspring to write grants. And then about a couple months ago, we hired Randy Redner, who's now with Wellspring. And so Randy's been helping me with some development and kind of what that looks like, getting me in front of donors and stuff. Fundraising is a huge part of my job. In fact, it's probably the biggest part of my job. And the larger we get, the bigger part of the job it's becoming. So
that makes sense. So Scott, how are you involved in the fundraising component or the financial aspect of the business?
So I'm a certified financial planner, obviously, like I mentioned earlier. And so we've got clients and we're talking to our clients about all kinds of stuff. Their estate plans, their charitable giving, who do they want money to go to? Should they pass away? Do they want to leave money to the charities, to their church, whatever charity that's close to their heart? Do they want to leave all their money to their kids? And just in the process of doing that, you have these conversations. In fact, I had a conversation with a client of mine on the way over here. He's going to give pretty much all of his IRA money this year to charities. And he and I talked about it. And I said, instead of being under the deadline of December 31st to determine how much and who and everything else, there's other options that we're going to talk about probably later this week. But one of those options is what's called a donor advised fund. So in his case, he wants to give his required minimum distribution to charity because otherwise he has to pay tax on it. If it goes directly to a charity, he doesn't have to pay tax on it. And so he's got monies and income from elsewhere. And because of that, he wants to give those monies to charity. And so a lot of time you're under the gun and you say, okay, I need to figure out how much, which charities and all this stuff by year end. But you can put it in a donor advised fund, which is really a kind of a charitable checking account is what I call it. You put that required distribution in there, and then you're under no obligation to give that money out. Ultimately, it's got to go to charity, but there's not a time frame on it. So put my required distribution in there, and I can give it out this year, I can give it out next year, I can give it out the following year. Ultimately, like I say, it has to go to charity, but you're not in a big rush to do it when you do a donor advised fund versus giving it directly to charity. So personally, I do a donor advised fund because it's a one-time decision. I make that decision at the end of the year. I put the money into charity, and then throughout the year, as a business person in town, lots of charities, individuals come to you and say, hey, can you support my cause? Can you give X dollar amount to the Boy Scouts as an example? But I've already made the decision to give, so I just give it out of my charitable checking account, my donor advised fund. That's
beautiful. And what we do is with the Community Foundation is we vet organizations like yours, Wayne, and we have donors and fund holders that have donor advised funds that are looking for opportunities and charities that are close to their heart. And so I'm going to let DePriest talk a little bit about that and how that works, because we are always looking for great organizations for a fund holder to get involved with their donor advised fund, as you mentioned, Scott, and where your passion and your heart is.
Yeah, I'm amazed at how many individuals really don't know. They want to be philanthropic, but they don't know where to give their money.
Right.
And they have a theme. I love kids. I love clean water. I love seniors. But then after that, other than the church and their alma mater, it gets really blurry as to where to give money to. So at the Community Foundation, our ears are always to the ground. We know which charities are doing what generally because they come to us. We have a leadership academy where we actually provide professional development to nonprofits. And it gives us a really great collaborative approach to helping nonprofits to be stronger, but then it also helps us to get under the hood as to what those causes really are so we can share them with our fund holders and take that guesswork out of it, because there's some nefarious kinds of things out there that you don't want your fund holders to give their good hard-earned money to. And we want to be able to vet those and make sure that they're giving it to really good, solid causes that are going to make a difference in the lives of individuals that need them.
Yeah, and I tell you, another valuable service that you guys provide is with Brett, who's been with you guys for a number of years. I've had clients say, yeah, I've got a charitable heart, I want to give, and here's the areas that I'd like to give, but I don't know the charities in town to necessarily give to. So Britt will set up 2 or 3 meetings and go out and see Rainbow Village, Eagle Ranch, and 2 or 3 others. And it really gives you a sense of who are the charities in town that I'd like to give to. And from there, you can develop a really strong relationship with them.
Yeah, that's a good point. Britt's phenomenal. She and Lynn Wynn, who's her deputy, Britt's the director of fund holder experience, and she does spread herself extremely thin and does it in a masterful way of connecting with nonprofits. Some of our nonprofits have funds with us, and we help them through Scott and our board to manage their endowment funds as well. And then we have other individuals that want to be really specific about what they want their funds to do. Some of them set up scholarship funds. We've set up a couple of scholarship funds this week. And then some of them set up endowments where they want to be really specific so that those dollars are invested in perpetuity, and they spend the interest away from that endowment every year for the causes that matter to them, because it's important to them that this legacy of giving is there long after they're with it. So we have a number of different ways that individuals can become moderately sophisticated and very sophisticated with their giving.
No, that's great. And you guys have always been great supporters of Families for Families. And yeah, we appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and
we value what you do.
Oh
we
my
love
gosh.
We can't do it without support.
Yeah.
And so
learning a little bit more about your involvement. Are you on the board, Scott, for Families?
I'm not on the board for Families. Yep.
Because we want you on our board only, and we want all of your time.
Well,
we want.
would this be a good time to ask Scott, because he couldn't say no now?
Maybe.
I'm trying to whittle my obligations down. I'm staying on y'all's board and one other board, but other than that, I'm trying to whittle.
That's right. You've got the kids leaving the house. You don't want to be.
Kids leaving the house. I need to travel a little bit so my wife doesn't leave me.
I'll tell you, when the Community Foundation for Northeast Georgia, like many other community foundations, we're like the community mutual fund, where we can cast a broad net and we can touch Family for Families or other foster care organizations, introduce you and others to this whole journey of fostering. I come from a background where I ran Families First for 3 or 4 years. And so I know what that assessment process looks like, and kids who are in distress and families that are in distress. And so having that sector of work in our Rolodex gives us an opportunity to share the journey, whereas other financial institutions aren't able to do that. I mean, you can get a donor advised fund through your local bank or your local financial institution, but that community knowledge is preeminently key to giving.
Yep.
And so,
I agree.
Scott, we need you where you are, because you've got a foot in both camps, and we need more investment advisors like you.
That's true.
Thank you.
And with it being the end of the year, people are thinking about, next year, our taxes. What are your thoughts on, Scott, as far as this timing to open a donor advised fund?
Yeah, I think the number, if I'm not mistaken, is 80% of charitable contributions happen in the fourth quarter. Mm-hmm. I know personally, you look through the course of the year and you say, okay, I can use X amount of a tax deduction. I know I'm going to give to charity regardless of income and things like that. But this year, maybe it was a particularly good year. So I'm going to increase that amount that I can deduct this year, because next year might not be quite as good of a year. And so I think a lot of people, myself included, at year end are looking at that saying, okay, I'm going to give. Let's take a look at income. Maybe you sold a piece of property, maybe you sold your business, whatever the scenario might be. And if you're planning on giving anyway, given those years, that tax deduction is the most valuable to you. And so I think a lot of people are going through that process right now. And they're also going through that required minimum distribution process. Most of our required distributions happen in fourth quarter. And so we're doing a lot of those right now. And so again, people are juggling, how much do I want to give to charity versus how much do I want to deposit in my bank account?
Yeah. And so it's perfect timing. And with the Community Foundation, we help to sell land, property, vehicles, pretty much anything, and then open up the opportunities that like Wayne's doing at Families for Families, and share with the different nonprofits and the community that may need some help or you're passionate about. So I think that's a really great opportunity for anyone that really wants to, as you said, Scott, if they're going to get the tax benefit. Yeah.
In my experience, it's hard to convince somebody to care. You know what I mean? It's either they do or they don't. Either they're getting a give or they're not. If you're going to give, in my experience, doing it through a donor advised fund is just a better way to do it. And there's multiple reasons. It's one, like I say, you can time the tax deduction. Two, everything comes on one tax receipt. It's not that big of a deal, but administratively, it is a little simpler for everything to come on one tax receipt. And frankly, for really big donors, because if you're a big donor in town, everybody knows, all the nonprofits know who gives the vast majority of the money. You can create a wall between you and some of the nonprofits. You simply say, hey, the community foundation handles all that stuff for me. Call Britt. She handles everything and vets everything for me. So it is a way to create a little bit of a wall between you and these various charities that invariably are going to be calling on you.
Yeah, no, you're right. And so we love anyone that wants to get involved and is listening to this and help Wayne and his organization. Or if you're an individual that wants to become a foster parent or adopt a child, two different things, but
Very different, yes.
Very different, but we need help. We need to work on in building our own country. There are kids, obviously, as you're describing, Wayne, that have the need, and the only way to do that, you need funding.
Right.
So you can't work without that.
Yeah, I think a lot of things people talk about in Atlanta is that Atlanta is the number one city in our nation for sex trafficking, and 70% of those girls in trafficking have a history of foster care.
Wow.
And so fighting for these kids while they're in foster care takes care of a lot of other problems down the road. 81% of our boys that age out of foster care will go to jail for survival crimes. That means they robbed a convenience store to have something to eat that night. And taking care of kids takes care of a lot of other issues down the road. And so I think that's a big, the other thing I think is like the community foundation, they work with a lot of nonprofits. There are no solo nonprofits. We all work together. If you work in sex trafficking, you're going to deal with foster care. If you work in foster care, you're going to deal with sex trafficking. If you work with homelessness, you're going to deal with what we're doing. And the good thing about organizations like the Community Foundation is to tie all that together, because when one person wins, we all win. When we help a family get their kids back because someone helps them not be homeless, that's a win for the family. It's a win for all the nonprofits and that. So it's a huge deal. But there's always help needed, and there's always vision that we're all trying to cast to get to donors. And I was glad to hear Scott tell me how they put the wall up between nonprofits and stuff. So I appreciate that, Scott, especially this time of the year. That means a lot. So, but it's okay. So
there's no wall between me and you, though.
I know that. Yeah, so.
This is just amazing.
Just got to have the right key.
No, that's right. That's right.
That's right. I think there are many opportunities for you, Wayne. And if someone wanted to get involved, how would they reach you?
So the best thing to do is go to familiesforfamilies.cc.
And that's a number 4.
It's a number 4. Yes. Familiesforfamilies.cc. Yeah, number 4. Or they can email me at wayne@familiesforfamilies.cc. And I would love to talk to them, whether it's about volunteering at a date night and coming holding a baby for 3 hours, or being a foster family, or if they want to talk to about funds and how we use them and what our vision for the funds are, what our vision for Georgia is. I'd love to share with them about that as well.
That would be incredible. And so email through your website, you can find you. And then Scott, if those are interested in opening a donor advised fund, how would they find you?
Just give me a call. My office number is 678-448-4843.
And it's Scott Phelan.
Yep.
And then, of course, the Community Foundation will direct you as well. And that's cfneg.org is our website. But we are so thrilled to have you here. And Wayne and Scott, thank you so much for making this journey from Gwinnett.
Thank you for coming.
That's a hike at this time of day anyway. And DePriest, anything that you'd like to share as we close?
I'm just going to say holiday season is approaching us. Take this opportunity to support Wayne and Families for Families with any extra support that you can give, from prayers to tangible.
Thank you.
That's right.
Wayne, thank you, and Scott, for coming today. This has been very inspirational.
It does take a village.
It does.
Like you said, and we're all in it together. Thank you all for listening, and we'll look forward to our next episode of Good to Give.
Thank you for joining us on the Good to Give podcast. This show is underwritten by the Community Foundation for Northeast Georgia, working with donors and nonprofits, improving our world through the power of philanthropy. For more information, go to cfneg.org.